and it's now going live stream. Sorry, the matters are being live streamed, and start with our apologies. As I said earlier, Georgina Connolly will join at 10 o'clock and Amy MacDonald at 11:15. Any further additions to those two apologies? Kia ora, Justine.
I just wanted to make some introductions, but that might be coming next, Tane.
Okay. So if there's no further apologies, someone move that we accept those two apologies, please. Moved by Virginia, seconded by Jane. We accept those apologies. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, any abstentions? Oh, was that an objection? We'll take that as a delayed support. Kia ora tātou. Yeah, so we can just come back to Justine and just give us some introductions on who's on here. Kia ora tātou.
Ata mare, everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you two new Kaipara Maurikura program staff members who started in KMR with myself last Monday. They'll only just be here for the start of the meeting and then might pop off. But I did want to get into the habit of, and as Ellen has started, of introducing our new Maurikura staff to you all. Before I invite them to introduce themselves, I'd just like to run through a little bit of context about their roles. These roles are very new from I guess, a perspective that they are bilingually named, which I think is a fantastic element of our kaupapa here in KMR. But also they're very, what I call engagement-focused, opportunities-centred, very much around reporting into the community, the iwi hapu whom we serve. And I think they're also looking for innovation rather than compliance for their roles. And that's, credit to the people and yourselves who approve those positions. So Darren Van Beek is our new Pūtaki Tiramahi, Whananaki and Oaha, our new Workforce Business Growth and Innovation Advisor. There he is there on the screen. Sandra's screen has just pointed the camera at Darren. He'll be reporting into Stephanie Versteeg, who's joining us mid-January. And he'll be working very closely with Stephanie, Willie and myself to support the workforce strategy, co-develop the new employment hub and find new opportunities for KMR. I know that's an area of great focus, particularly in respect of third-party partnerships. Tahiro Bishop, we may need to move the camera a little bit. Yeah, kia ora, Tahi, is our new Pūtoho Roora Koawa, our Catchment Remediation Advisor. And many of you will know Tahi from his previous roles. And this is, Tahi's role is in Lizette's team, whom we met, I think, at our last meeting. Be working with landowners and iwi hapu on opportunities to develop sediment reduction plans and also engage with communities on wider KMR initiatives. So I'd like to now invite Tahi and Darren just to briefly introduce yourselves. Kia ora.
Kia ora, ko Tahiro Henare Toka Bishop toku ingoa. Ko te urihau te apu, o te matia rau ko waiohanga ngā marae, o te matia rau ko wairoa ngā awa, toka te maunga, mahu ki te rangi te waka, no tino pai ahau. And kia ora whānau, obviously just new here, I started last week, and moving forward as a Catchment Remediation Advisor for the team, and I look forward to doing the mahi. Mauri ora.
Kia ora tahi.
Darren?
Tēnā koutou i te whānau. Ko Darren Van Beek tōku ingoa. Huri ahau no roto muri whenua, no roto Ngāti Kahu, no reira māmaru te waka, kāre te maunga, waikuti te awa, kina nā te marae, Ngāti Kahu te iwi, ki te taho tōku pāpa he tate mana hau. Aha ko no muri whenua ahau, I tipu ai ahau, I raro I te korowai o Ngāti Whātua, I ai nei nā kei manga whai tōku kāinga, ki te tā o ōku whanaunga o tūrua ahau, nō reira tēnā koutou. Ai, I tērā wiki I te mata ai ahau I konei, ki te KMR, ko taku mahi I konei, ko au te pūtahi tira mahi whanake auaha, ara te Workforce Business Growth and Innovation Advisor. So I'm really looking forward to doing the mahi as Tahiroa mentioned, and just looking forward to making some intergenerational change for the whenua, the Moana and our people. So kia ora.
Kia ora, and I thank you both. And I notice also we want to say kia ora koutou and ngā mihi, kia koe e whaia tuata, who is now sitting with in the office there with Darren, Sandra and Tahi. So welcome. I think you may have rung me this morning, so very good to see you.
Ko tū te kokstei tōku e wā, ko ngā te kātou tūturu, ko ngā mūtu kia ora.
Kia whaia.
Back to you, Tammy, I think, for declarations of interest.
A tēnā koutou katoa, te whae tuata, nho mai nā I te tari o Kaipara Māori kura, putātu hoki ki ngā tokorua nei korua tahi e Darren me Tahiroa, ka rongo I o kaurua tūranga, ara tokorua urunga atu ki te rōpu o Kaipara Māori kura, ka koa, ka hari, ara e tupu haere ana ngā hautū, ngā hunga hei amo I ngā tūranga amo te kaupapa. Kei mua nei o tātou aroro, nā reira nau mai, ono mai, tomo mai, kake mai, ki runga ki te waka o Kaipara Māori kura, e hora nei I ona whakaaro mo tō tātou Moana tauri kura, kei mua nei a tātou katoa. Thank you, Justine, and probably useful, I guess, to update our organisational chart as these positions are being filled. I sort of had a bit of a look this morning, and I think the last one we got was about July sometime. And as people are taking these roles and positions, it'd be great to get a profile, if you like, of how that's all heading. Any further comments from any of the members?
I just supported, obviously, Tammy, that's all. That's Councillor Sayers. No, good idea.
Just wondered before we get into our agenda proper, a reminder about matters of conflict or conflicts of interest or interest that may be conflicted. I'm never quite sure how to pitch that, but it's there. It's there and it's thereabouts, and just remind us all that as we progress all of our business today to be mindful of that, and if there are direct matters, can you please complete our standard form and make sure that's passed over to Sandra.
Good.
Okay, can we rely on you to provide our shared screen, Sandra? Okay.
No, that's fine. I'm happy to do the shared screen. So yeah, just let me know when you need that, and then I'll put it on there for you.
Okay. Can we put the agenda up? And
sure.
People can just double check those that are presenting that we've got the right running sheet.
I'm just going to do the screen sharing now. One moment. Okay, have we got, can you see that? Yep.
Okay. Oh, God.
So we've got Alan up first with the interim Potataki report, followed by the funding criteria that will be delivered by John Hutton. Operating under COVID-19, I believe is being delivered by Justine,
Okay.
Ben and Willie.
All right. Can we go back to confirmation of the minutes of 15th of November?
Sure.
Have someone moved the confirmation of those minutes, please? Penny Smart, seconded Malcolm Welsh. Any, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Kia ora, as passed. And any matters arising out of those minutes? There's no matters arising. We'll move straight to our order of business. And tēnā koe, Alan Wilcox.
Kia ora Tami, me koutou katoa. So, the last acting Potataki report, and I think what Justine's keen to do, and I'm sure she'll tell you a little bit later on, is to have sort of some sort of envisioning report or discussion a little bit later on, but I'm sure she'll mention that in due course. So this is really a little bit of, if you like, a look back as opposed to what's current and what's happening in the future. I think you've just met Darren Van Beek and Tahiro Bishop, and you may recall that we did circulate an updated Marikura structure chart with the names on it last meeting, but we will circulate that again today, since just so that everybody can have the latest version of it. So we've basically there's 2 or potentially 3 positions still left that could be filled, and I think what we had decided to do was to wait, see how they go, particularly how they work in the field, and then in the new year to review again. But apart from that, 12 of the 16 positions have been fulfilled, and currently 1 is out still for awaiting responses. So we've now got a full Marikura staff complement, with Steph Vesti coming in on the 17th of January, and I think that will enable the Marikura to move forward very rapidly, even as it is at the moment. And within the Marikura, there's been so much activity and so much fermentation, and that's beginning to bubble over outside of internal discussions, and people in the community are now being contacted. There's activity, there's work taking place. So Marikura is basically untying the moorings to the wharf and is about to set sail. So that's where that is. Happy to answer any questions in a minute, and I'm sure Justine will have some perspectives as well. Communications with landowners, just as quickly to report on the 3 hui that we had with respect to the landowner grants criteria, and we had engaged with all of those who had emailed us or identified that they wanted to be part of the program and were interested in SRPs. So about 40 people attended, and I think we got some quite interesting feedback, and some of that is in the next paper that John will be discussing, so I won't carry on about that. Land management advisors training. As you know, that we have staff within the Māori Kura who will be overseeing field officers, essentially. And those field officers, 13 of those have been identified. And from all feedback, there was very, very positive training, which took place from the 29th of November to the 1st of December. And Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd just like perhaps Duncan to comment on that, since he hosted the training, and for him to give us sort of a perspective on how that went and the opportunities which that's going to provide the KMR program with.
Ora koutou, good morning. All in all, I think it was quite a success. We hosted it down in Matakoi, and we had a residential where people could stay on site, but also many people travelled in every day. So we had a wide variety of trainees, some with lots of skills and lots of experience, and others with lots of expertise under different guises or a different backgrounds. So we definitely recognise there's some core considerations and core competencies. So we focused on them, and then we took it was a combination of process and understanding and background of how the Māori Kura is going to work, and the grant funding and the sediment reduction plans, and then we took them out in the field and tested them on real life situations, of which was relatively testing for some of the trainees, and we recognised that some are ready to go and others will need a little more assistance, on which we're designing the program around that assistance. So of the 13 attendees, 5 are affiliated or working for Kaipara Uri organisations, which has really added so much more to the week. It was amazing, actually, as a personal reflection, that the trainees, the trainers got so much out of it, and we've learnt a lot. I'm going to move forward on this and hopefully start more additional training late February and into March. Any questions I'm happy to ask at this point. No? Okay, thank you very much for that opportunity, Alan.
Thanks, Duncan. So that gives us some immediate capacity to get out into the field. That needs to be supplemented, of course, with a number of the sort of policies which are finally landing, health and safety policies, and some of the other key dimensions which are finally being landed as well. So that's some of the training which took place. The next item on my agenda there is workforce development, and we had a very positive sort of progress hui with Ministry of Social Development, contributed to by some of the Te Reo Hau Environs staff last Thursday. And essentially what's happening is we're trying to get some things moving. With Darren coming on board, he will be the key person who will be interfacing with MSD, and MSD have also appointed Ebony McKendry, who from their side will be working closely with the Māori Kura and on the Jobs for Nature activity, which the majority of that is KMR. So between Darren and McKendry and Ebony, they will be working through what they need to do in their respective roles. From the Māori Kura side of things, we're well advanced in the accreditation of contractors and nurseries. And part of the questions which we asked and the information that we requested the nurseries and the contractors to submit was how much engagement did they have with MSD, and would they want any additional information and assistance? And all of them either have engagement with MSD, or a significant number that didn't, said that they wanted it. So that gave us the door for us in that accreditation process to be able to get them to interface with us with respect to employee and employer subsidies, training, and a whole range of other things which the Workforce Hub is designed to do. Te Reo Hau, and we know also Ngā Manga Whakahi, and I know there's been some discussion with Te Roro as well, are also keen to provide training assistance and to provide, to identify rangatahi and others in marae and in spaces around the rohi, and to identify what work skills they have and what direction their career path is taken, and to offer that training assistance. That will be funded by MSD. And then MSD, of course, have a number of tangata who are on their books through their work brokers and others. And so together what we're looking at with this hub, and we've identified immediate opportunities under the flexi wage scheme, is to begin to start linking some of that together. To begin to start linking some of the individuals who are registered unemployed and would like to move. We've also identified a number of those who are now going to be preferred suppliers for KMR, and the Uri are ready to and keen to move ahead with training as well. So what will happen is that we'll be able to go to potential employers and say, look, here's a range of opportunities, and to potential employees and say exactly the same thing, and to be able to provide some incentives, which would be MSD funded, to both sides, and to enable the kind of connections which we I think are possible. So I think we're in a very, very good space there. But Justine, also you were involved in those conversations, and you had a range of thoughts too. So I'd be grateful if you could perhaps pass those on at the moment too.
Certainly. A key thing just to note with this group, and we'll certainly be looping in a number of the right people and bringing this back to yourselves, but we have been asked by MSD to develop a 90-day plan in respect of the employment hub and how it might operate. The Joint Committee might recall that the MOU that we signed with the Ministry of Social Development is quite high level, and to get this really cranking, the request has been to sort of chart out what the next 3 months of activity actually looks like. So we'll be working with MSD and a range of others, including Environs and Te Reo Hau generally, but others around the table, to figure out what it is that our employment workforce development strategy really needs to focus on first. And I think that's quite an important element. There's a lot to do in KMR, as you know. It's a program that is in development across the board. And I think we know that this area is a critical priority for achieving the outcomes, the investment outcomes for the program. So from my perspective, I'm really prioritising this piece of work. And I would like to be able to keep you up to date and seek approvals as relevant for that 90-day plan. We have been asked by MSD to work fast on this. It sounds very much like they have opportunities to reshape or perhaps flex some of the other investment, I guess, funding sources for our purposes. And I think we need to move quickly on this. So I guess I'm signalling that we may need to seek both your permission and your approvals in the early quarters of next year. But we will, through my report and through perhaps informal reporting over the Christmas period, keep you up to date about where that's heading, if I have your permissions for that. I'm really excited about that. I think there is a lot that can be done, and without going into too much detail, there are already some what I call fairly specific opportunities that are being developed, including by some of the Auckland Council staff as well, in support of the employment hub. More details will come on that, but I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing there. A couple of other partnership and other opportunities in the workforce space are perhaps more medium term, but it's worth signalling those to yourselves perhaps now. We have, for example, the Sustainable Business Council having reached out. They obviously are a membership agency that bring together some of New Zealand's largest employers who want to invest in both environmental and social outcomes. I happen to know the CEO pretty well. She's reached out privately to me to say, is there anything we can do to support the work of Kaipara Moana remediation? And so I plan to have a sit down and talk to herself. There may well be employment as well as third-party investment opportunities through that. And just as an example, SBC announced a partnership opportunity just last week with some of our similar afforestation initiatives in other parts of the country. There are also some private sector partners who, for commercial and competence reasons I won't name, who are reaching out. So I think that while the focus must be around the community-led, early-led initiatives at the minute in respect of workforce development, I'm already seeing some of the more medium-term opportunities there. And a key conversation that I'd like to have with yourselves as soon as we can in the new year would be around the relative focus for my leadership around both short-term initiatives very much around delivering now versus some of those more medium and long-term opportunities which are perhaps beyond the term of the current program, and what the relative balance and focus for my time should be. Now, I have some thoughts on that which will come in a paper, but it's more a conversation perhaps for our first workshop in the new year. Thank you.
Thanks, Justine. So just perhaps moving back on onto my report then, South Kaipara Streams, just to identify to the committee that the piece of work that had been commissioned in last year's work program, which did have a little bit of a spillover effect into this year's because of COVID and others, has now come to its sort of milestone. I say milestone because while it was completed as to what we envisaged, we also felt that it needed to be peer reviewed and also need to identify how we utilize that work. Having said that, it does throw some very interesting opportunities for us to be able to see priority areas for sedimentation and remediation in the South Kaipara area. And it's a piece of work which, if methodologically stacks up, could be even extended to other areas of the catchment, which would be quite interesting to identify how we prioritise work. Without going into too much detail, it shows there's probably sort of 10%, 5 to 10% of any particular area which are causing, vast amounts of the sedimentation, and those are probably the areas that you'd be wanting to focus SRPs on. And finally, without going into too much detail about what we've done, because all of you have been part of that, I'd just like to just make a couple of concluding comments, and that's just to thank everyone, in particular Kaipara Uri, for just giving me the opportunity to be part of this program. As you know, sort of Willie kind of introduced me through the back door for some work that I was doing with Te Reo Hau on 1BT. and ended up, working on the interim management team for a period of time, and to be able to reflect what Uri wanted was a great honour for me, and I really appreciate that. And then to be able to have this role in the interim, I've also really enjoyed, and hopefully we've done some good and moved it forward. So I just really appreciate that and appreciate the joint committee support. Malcolm's not here at the moment, but I'd just like to extend that to Malcolm Nicholson as well for his support as well. So I'd just like to thank you all and wish you all the very, very best for the future, which is tremendous opportunities. Thank you very much. Happy to answer questions on my report, by the way.
Tēnā koe, Alan. Any comments from any of the members?
Kia ora, Tami. Hey, just quickly on the workforce development, and just to note, potentially a conflict, probably more of an opportunity. MPI have an MOU with MSD in workforce development, and the same person, Ebony, will be seconded into our project. So potentially a whole lot of synergies there. So just noting that as a potential conflict, but more than likely more opportunity than anything. Yeah, so that's just on that. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Malcolm. Thanks for that clarification. It's probably a feature of a number of these kind of issues, particularly as programs around shovel-ready, freshwater improvement, jobs for nature, as it all sort of converges on activities that we've been involved in. Any further questions on the points that have been raised by both Ellen and Justine?
Kia ora through the chair. Kia ora Tami through the chair. I had done a bit of a chat comment and just in supporting the Rohe-wide employment hub initiative. That's most definitely going to be a large chunk of the mihi for Darren, especially since he'll be, when we're allowed to, that is, going around the rohe and meeting with respective entity workforce developments and business managers. So that's really good. Yeah, look to be meeting him when he comes down to Ngā Maunga Whakahi. Kia ora.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jane. Just remind Sandra if we could somehow merge the sidebar questions and points that are being raised into the actual recording of the meeting.
Okay.
Any further comments from any of the members? I just want to follow that last the last couple of comments and go back to the South Kaipara sedimentation remediation discussions, Ellen. And I guess from a picture or view that we've taken over how the program could roll out, I think it's quite important that we keep the alignment in the right lane. So when we talk about South Kaipara, sometimes we range between Forest Bridge Trust up the Hōteo River, a group of farmers on South Head, the 5 marae of Ngā Maunga Whakahi, or individual land blocks like Otakanini, or some interest at Rewiti, or some interest at Araparera. And I think for purposes of direction and setting and alignment, it would be great to start either categorizing, well, that's not even the right word, but keeping the alignment connected to, because we made the effort at the outset to connect with marae, to connect with uri. And we've heard a number of proposals promoted through that effort. But what's difficult now is to work out, are any of those proposals connected with this last set of discussions and, where things and developments have got to date? That was all. I'm all for the one holistic overview, but I think in the business of delivering on the ground, and it's like what Duncan covered off, it's not till the rubber hits the road and you have to engage with the individual landowners who sign up to a program of remediation, riparian, fencing and planting, because all the rest of it can be tagged and connected to another program. But as far as the Kaipara Moana remediation program is concerned, I think it's critical to keep that alignment clear and uncluttered and unencumbered, and otherwise we could be all lumped into the same mix unintentionally. But I think there is a way through that. Ellen, Justine, I'll just raise it as a point of clarification, really.
Yeah. Kia ora, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure Justine and the Marikura staff that are listening will take that on board. I'm absolutely certain of that. I think just historically this had been a piece of work funded by the Auckland Council, so they were operating within their rohi, if you like. So it probably covered all of those things that you mentioned, those areas that you mentioned. But because it was sort of based on a Western science model, the level of engagement with mana whenua and with haukainga wasn't strong. It wasn't deliberately avoided, but at the same time, it was a piece of work essentially based on landform, land features, and hydrology, and which is one input into the area. And I think that's one of the reasons why Justine's very keen to get to see it in its context, and I'm sure she'll comment on that. Kia
ora, Justine.
So thank you, and thanks, Alan, for those comments. A couple of things just to put on the table, perhaps for discussion as time allows, maybe rather than now, but to signal them. One is I'm very keen to bring the Mātauranga Māori aspects together with science. I know that maybe there's been a couple of false starts in this space for KMR, and we need to get on and do, but these things are done reasonably readily elsewhere. And from my perspective, there is a slight danger in proceeding with a solely Western science-focused paradigm in this type of program, given our kaupapa. And what I mean by that is that there are outcomes that have been agreed by those who have signed the MOU, which go beyond environmental outcomes, which speak to people in place. So I do expect that there will be that, I guess, that place-based and people-centred approach going forward. I'm very much in aligning with Tame's comments here. There are a couple of ways to do that without slowing the boat, which I'd like to think about with yourselves. One of them is I'm really conscious too that we need effective science peer review of all of the these types of reports, the digital tools as well, that this group, the Joint Committee, as a governance group, will need assurance that what is coming up through the Mōrikura is well tested by experts in the field, and that there is some summary, if you like, of that advice and reflection to this committee. And that's because none of us, perhaps I've missed something, but none of us are IT experts, digital tools experts, and there are a great degrees of support that we can freely access and reflect, so that when this group is considering papers to the Joint Committee, that you have access and a reflection of that external third-party advice. It's something that we can set up, and I have in mind, subject to your thoughts, to put together some small, perfectly formed and very agile light touch steering groups to support that type of what I call technical input, a digital tools sort of reference group. And of course, I would like to make sure that there's a adequate representation on that group with from and by Uri, but also those people who understand how to develop digital tools that can also reflect cultural monitoring and what I call beyond Western science perspectives. So those are things that I have in mind, and obviously early days, but also a stakeholder reference group. Do we need inputs from the communities writ large that can help us think about these things as we develop KMR-wide applications or programs? Obviously, there's some key partners that will be in the tent, from day zero. But there are also other community and iwi hapu interests. There are business interests. Even the fisheries industry, for example, have a high degree of interest in this program. A lot of people who want to help us make the boat go faster. How do we include them beyond sending out a newsletter, beyond perhaps sending them an update to a website? And I'm particularly speaking to in a COVID environment where we haven't been able to get into the community very widely. We haven't actually been able to get into our Tamaki Makaurau part of the rohe, the catchment, which is really important. So I'm wondering how we seek that input effectively, time effectively, cost effectively, get the right people to help us. Now, that's not something that you need to make a decision on now, but any thoughts you have in advance of some paperwork coming as soon as I can in the new year would be helpful if the chair allows and if time allows today. Thank you.
Kia ora, Justine. I'll climb in early on behalf of Kaipara Uri and advocate for anything that promotes relationships, partnerships, collaboration, collective effort, but definitely never and not stakeholders. And the explanation is a simple one. There's too much that's left to chance if you go back to the derivative of the word stakeholder. And that just rings in my ears as our people are faced with the term. But you know, I think there are those are very workable options and ideas, and particularly the range of relationships that we're dealing with. And I think even in the context of ngā kōrero te wākainga, ngā kōrero te haukainga, and somewhere in that mix comes mātauranga Māori. I don't think it's the other way around. I don't think we're driven by this national phenomena of mātauranga Māori in every way, shape and form. But what we're trying to encourage here is the model that brings this about, brings these connections about is top down, bottom up. And that includes where our people are located. And you made reference to connecting people in places with the program. But, you know, thank you both for those responses. And if there are no further comments to Alan.
Kia ora, Chair.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Chair. Kia ora koutou. I'd just like to make one comment, Chair, and that's when we are talking mātauranga Māori and also intellectual property rights. So I think we need to also look at that, Justine, to the intellectual property rights to each of the Te Uri o Hau, ngā maunga whakahi, the Runanga. And we did talk right at the beginning of possibilities of wānanga. So I take it that we would take this discussion right into our workshops.
Through the chair, Tame, thank you, Cherie, for those comments. I do have something similar in mind, subject to your thinking as a joint committee. We know that the Y262 government response is coming. That will allow a lot of opportunities for the Uri involved in this partnership and more broadly. And I'm really conscious of those opportunities, and I look forward to perhaps having a workshop session with this group and then taking things out. But the kaupapa here is absolutely to test and refine. And I must admit, I would like, the COVID has been a real impact, and you'll see in the next couple of papers that we're still, affected by the COVID in terms of getting out. But where possible, my principles is, from a leadership perspective, is to engage early and give people time to think about what are actually quite complex things that we're asking them to think about and get back to us on. I don't want to be so rushed around. There is a tension there around delivery, but there will be some elements that can come in slightly slower time that I really think it's important we do properly. And we do properly in the context of hearing from people, listening and responding, as well as in the context of the fact that there are things happening potentially in the national space or regional space that are actually really important that we understand and align to as suits KMR. So those two elements are sometimes at odds, but for me, trying to manage those two tensions is kind of where I come from a leadership. There's an equity piece there that's really important for me. So thank you for those comments, Cherie.
Kia ora, Justine. It's been really good working with both Auckland and Northland Regional Councils with their scientists on classical science, not just Western. And it's been how we were looking at joining the classical science with mātauranga Māori. Kia ora. Kia ora, Chair. Thank you.
Kia ora, Cherie. Any further comments? Okay, perhaps this is definitely not a farewell speech, Alan, but, want to really thank you for your contributions, your insights, leadership, and tenacity, I think, is a good descriptor in my mind. Very complicated and very complex sort of set of dynamics that we had to try and work our way through. But moving from a space of negotiating the operational part of the Kaipara Moana program into a sort of deed of or memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement, as it were, and then traversing all of that with following that up with the deed of funding and, of course, stepping out. We had a couple of false starts in that space, but, you know, unlike the, I mean, just as well as the launch of Kaipara Māori Kura on the 3rd of December, we got there, and here we are today. So I want to just acknowledge your, the support, the insights, the direction you gave to not only the Kaipara Moana Joint Committee, but certainly the transitional phase up until we signed that memorandum of understanding back in October last year. And I trust we are gonna continue to have you on speed dial, and I'm sure with the level of relationships and the direction we're heading, really see a tremendous value in having you alongside of the Joint Committee, and particularly the remediation program. I noticed we have Georgina Connolly online here as well, and I'm sure that, you know, this was never intended to be a farewell, but I just wanted to acknowledge all of your efforts and transition that we've gone through, starting back on the 6th of December with our tautātaki. Tēnā koe, ngā mihi mai hora tēnei wehenga o ngā uri o te kaipara kia koe era. Me o kāwai whakaheke kia kaungunu, i ongo whakaata, aitanga mahaki ki te tairāwhiti. Tēnā koe, kia ora tātaki.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Tautoko.
Thank you for the acknowledgement also of my whakapapa, so very much appreciated. Thank you very much. Kia ora.
Yeah, you know, whatever shape and way this remediation goes, you can be rest assured that we do acknowledge Takitimu and the places of significance in our rohe. I mean, the otamatea in Kaipara Moana is the same otamatea as you have down on the eastern seaboard of the North Island. Ruawharo, it's the same person, no difference. So Takitimu, and according to our legacy, called in there. I'm not so sure whether it was lack of air conditioning that might have put them off, or but that waka didn't sort of anchor or land per se, as we've been told. But it is there, and the footprint and the iconic markers
if I have
are
this
still
out
there.
loud.
No. Tēnā koe, Helen.
I'll turn
Kia ora
it down. It's not
Okay.
letting me hear them.
Can we have a mover and a seconder to receive the report from Alan Wilcox, please? Moved by Jane Sherrard, seconded by Virginia Warrener. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against? Any abstentions? Kia ora. Thank you both. And our next agenda item, please, Sandra. Sorry, I'll dive in then.
Yep, our funding criteria presented by John Hutton. John, did you need me to share, screen share? No, you've got it.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. In a little while, we'll screen share the PowerPoint, if that's okay. But if I can make a few introductory comments to the paper. Actually, before I do that, could I also acknowledge Alan? It's been a pleasure working with you as a colleague, Alan. You brought really wonderful experience and balance to this. And in the earlier phases, I also felt Kaipara were extremely well served by you representing their interests in this. So sorry to see you go into a whatever the new state is, but just thought I'd say that. Look, on this paper 5.2, it's a bit of a co-authored affair, and we're going to take a tag team approach here with Duncan talking to the PowerPoint. And I should say we've added the PowerPoint in a little bit last minute, but the intention is that although it looks simple, the criteria change that we're asking for approval here has some subtlety to it, and we felt it was worth taking the time to work through our thinking here. So look, as you'll recall, the Joint Committee approved interim criteria for sediment reduction plans back in March. We had another look at them in July, and those criteria were confirmed again in a provisional way, pending further engagement with community hapu, so forth and so on. Since July, that engagement has taken place. There have been conversations with landowners, with Fonterra, with nursery owners, with various stakeholders in the community, and I may say stakeholders, not Māori stakeholders, but other stakeholders in the community. And of course, there have been the recent consultation hui, which took place. 2 of them were in person and 1 was online. And this has given us collectively a fair bit of feedback on the criteria, and on the whole, the criteria have stood up pretty well. But there are these areas here where we do think we need a change, and that's why we're bringing this paper to you. The 2 areas that we're key areas we're seeking change in is the riparian setback distances for planting and fencing. Now, I should say, I must stress here that these are not changes to the minimum distances, which, as the paper sets out, there's a pretty solid 3-metre setback rule for the flatter forms of land, and that rule is a nationally derived one. Where the changes that we're looking for are coming in is to actually expand the average width or distance back from the stream that we're happy to fund planting in, and in particular to allow a greater level of flexibility to be able to go out to about a 20-metre distance. I'll let Duncan talk through that at a technical level very soon. The last observation, and of course we'll take questions and discuss this, but our last observation is in terms of the implications of these changes for the program, they are broadly in line with the overall costs and benefits that we've mapped out through the indicative business case and further work. Yes, there would be a greater width of planting in particular allowed, but this, as Duncan will explain, is likely to be confined to specific places, and those places are likely to generate considerably high sediment reduction benefits. So we think on balance the mix is going to be good. What we will be able to do further down the track is model and test this further, but that involves further work both on the digital tools that we're doing and also rerunning some of the financial modelling that we have. Right now, the priority for the program is to get sediment reduction plans agreed with landowners to really step up the amount of work and the amount of engagement. And I think the most important thing with the recommended criteria change is that they do provide flexibility to respond, for the landowner to respond to the particular characteristics of where streams are travelling through their properties. And therefore it's a flexibility that will make this more attractive to the landowner. Effectively, we won't be hobbling ourselves. But if I could just ask Duncan to do a quick blast through a bit of a 101 on the whole question of riparian distance or planting distance and things. But so Sandra, if you can just bring up that PowerPoint, that would be great. We're just waiting for the PowerPoint. Here we go. Wonderful. And if you can forward on to, I think it's the...
Kia ora koutou. Can everyone hear me? I'm just having a few techie problems. Is that clear? Thank you for the opportunity to have a discussion today about this. It's been a topic that, as John has introduced, we've tested, we've taken into the field, and we've had some solid feedback. So hopefully bringing this to you. There we go. Sorry, thank you. The key principles of riparian and wetland management has a long time, the last 10 years, we've been told that the single best practical solution to water quality and restoration, habitat restoration, is in this riparian zone. It is the last line of defense between the land and the water, and it is, in certain situations, very good at attenuating pollutants of various types. Biodiversity improves the aquatic, i.e. the conditions that the bugs and beasties in the stream are living in, as well as joining the terrestrial ecosystems together as that seal around the waterways, which Alan phrased very succinctly. However, it's not the only fix, and we need to be considering what's going on in the rest of the landscape, what other soil conservation measures are taking place, and what does good farming practice look like, and what's being achieved as farms slowly develop through the measures that are being proposed in the freshwater farm plans. So this isn't just a one-stop shop. This is a combination of many things, but it is the last line of defense. Sorry, there we go. As a quick reminder, there's three major processes that take place for contaminants transporting themselves across the landscape in a diffuse way, because this is diffuse pollution. The most direct form of this diffuse pollution is where the stock have direct access to the streams and where the stock have direct damage, causing direct damage to the banks. So that's the key thing, and that's where those fences come in are crucial. The second one, and particularly in Northland in winter, it's quite seasonal, is that surface runoff. The overland flow path, when it rains a lot, it picks up all the pollutants and takes them with them to the waterway. And that buffer or that margin is really important on how we deal with those pollutants coming through. And then in the summer, we have a more surface flow and drainage driven process. Not so much sediment is caught there because it goes through the cracks and through the soil process profiles. But again, really important in a Northland context. But overall, as I've said before, the catch-all contaminant of sediment does a lot of these things, plus create habitat and improve biodiversity, both aqua and terrestrial. But within a complex landscape, such as we have in the rolling hills of Northland and large parts of Auckland, we have specific runoff geologies, topography, vegetation cover and land use that is different in every situation. We did set minimum criteria because one, a lot of them catches a lot of the contaminants and provides some of the best practice methodology at 3 to 5 meters, but also because it applies and aligns with the NES freshwater rules. And pure practical sense, for when you plant in buffers, you need at least 5 meters, at least 5 meters for woody vegetation to give them space to grow. So there's no magic width, but we certainly want to look at some of the options. So we aren't changing the minimum setbacks, as John reiterated. They stay in place. There's no change to the 3 meter minimum setback. There's no change to the 5 minimum setbacks. It makes either common sense or it's a national rule. However, the maximum average setbacks is where we were getting into corridor on farm. The 5 meter maximum average setback wasn't proven to be as palatable as it could have been around certain aspects of the landscape. And the next slide will try and demonstrate those things. So we have proposing up to 10 meter average setback on the side of the waterway, either side of the waterway. And in certain situations, and I'll show one next, where we can widen up to a 20 meter envelope of protection on one side. And in doing so, creates flexibility to align with the landscape and the aspirations of the landowner. And with the wetland planting, we proposed a 5 metre fringe wetland planting, and we're also going to try and align that with the riparian process because they're all contiguous, they all tend to be in the same waterways, move it out to the 10 metre fringe as well. Importantly, when you're looking at a landscape, so Uncle Willie might find this familiar. When we went out with the Fonterra staff, the whole team in Ruapeka back in late September, we looked at this one tricky gully. This is a dairy farm, so this is still class 3 for land, still creating milk, still considered to be really important for the landowners part of the farm practice. But we noticed, you'll notice on the map, I'll just describe it very briefly. The red lines are the proposed new fences. The purple lines are the existing fences that are in situ already. The green blotches are where the farmer would in a perfect scenario, consider plantation. There's a small red gully in the middle where we're having problems with active erosion, and the blue blotch at the bottom is a wetland. For the wetland to be retired and the eroding gully to be protected and for the steep embankment to be planted, we needed to push the fence lines out. We need to push the fence lines out in the big green blotch in the middle out to 20 metres. That's actually quite a steep slope. It's actively moving. It'd be perfect for native afforestation. And the fence line makes perfect sense for a place to put an efficient and cheap fence in on a dairy farm using a tractor. And again, at the top, you've got a critical source area, which is potentially being actively eroded from that gully below downstream. Again, great opportunity to plant, but we needed to widen it out. And the wetland the same. We weren't intending on planting the wetland, but the aspiration for fencing, replacing the black fences, which are the existing fences, made a lot of common sense and allowed the farmer to align with the national rules. So that's kind of a real life situation. We had 3 to 5 metre setbacks in one gully. Even with just grass riparian strips, the buffer often depends on a whole lot of features that are directly adjacent to that waterway. Slope class is crucial, the slope length is crucial, the severity of the problem, and what the landowner is willing to lose in productive land, i.e. the opportunity cost. So every scenario has a different set of drivers. So just to summarize, adjusting the criteria within KMR is to meet the complex landscape. It provides additional flexibility in maximum width to match the landscape features. And in a lot of these areas, some of those pugged wetlands, those areas of wet paddock, those areas where they've got steep slopes adjacent to streams that are actively eroding, we have a much better reduction in sediment. But when we go to the interface with the landowners, they've got real ideas of what their preference is and what is a practical solution to their on-farm issue. And again, allows us that flexibility to meet it. So hopefully, in summary, we're providing better landowner buy-in and environmental benefit all in one go. And I'll hand over back to John.
Thank you, Duncan. I just note that the example Duncan gave is of a reasonably complex gully there. In many instances, what you will have is landowners being very happy to stick to a 5 metre buffer if the landscape is appropriate, and to do some planting in that space, because that will keep the paddock width maximised. In other words, you're going to lose less land from the paddock. So we're not anticipating this wider width to be taking place everywhere, but we want the flexibility to do that. So look, how about I stop at this stage? The paper does have a couple of other extra points. One's on just setting a dollar figure for contributions to gates, and another piece is the kind of process steps that we are proposing for planting, where we differentiate between the bigger planting jobs, where being able to get money to the nurseries in terms of down payments is important, and then the smaller planting jobs, which are often undertaken by the landowner themselves. And it's reasonably subtle, but we're wanting a distinction here in process, and we thought that would be useful to come to you as well. But look, happy to take questions. Over to you, Chair.
Kia ora. Thank you, John. Duncan, and we've got a couple of hands up, starting with Danielle.
Kia ora, Chair. Thanks, John and Duncan. That's really good, and I like to see the science behind it presented for everybody, Duncan. I'm passionate about riparian margins, passionate about protecting our streams. With my experience of catchment management, sediment reduction, the bigger the riparian margin, the better. And I understand the conflicts we have between the amount of money that we can provide, the amount of land that somebody can lock up to do this. But I wonder whether there's space that we could, with our land advisors, we could say, while this area could be funded for this area of riparian margins, we would suggest that the landowner over time might like to extend those, and maybe that could be something that they could fund themselves or wait for future funding later. But the fence lines could enable that. So if our land advisors suggest that the riparian margin could be bigger, but we can't fund it completely, it could still be future-proofed through the advice that we give. So I'd be keen to know what your thoughts are on that.
The opportunities for further extension or placement of sensible fences is high, because a grass strip, again, is quite an effective sediment reducer, for want of a better phrase. So we will promote sensible fence lines, wide margins of grass, and that provides the landowner opportunity to plant laterally if they see fit. But either way, stock out of the water, wide grass strips is the best way forward. Kia ora.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Kia ora, Malcolm Welsh.
Oh, kia ora. Yeah, really supporting this paper. I just have a question. 20 metre buffer zone. Are we getting into the area of carbon sequestration ETS scale? And is there any tension? Do you see any tension between this and that, as far as people potentially leveraging this to support their carbon initiatives?
Thank you, Malcolm, through the chair. The ETS requires a buffer of a minimum of 15 metres to be eligible for the ETS emission trading scheme. So I wouldn't say it's a conflict. I would say it's a co-benefit for the landowner if they do wish to engage and sell the ETS. But that co-benefit will also go through the programme of Te Waka Ikanoa, where landowners might be able to offset their carbon emissions based on the activity they've done on farm with respect to fence and wetlands and forestation. So either way, I think it benefits the landowners. Either way, I think it benefits our project and the buy-in from landowners. So I don't see it as a conflict, Malcolm.
And I should add, we've got further work to do as a program on criteria for afforestation and other land stabilisation options that's happening in the new year. The idea being right now, as we've rehearsed before, there's very much a focus on the riparian margins, on getting the seals in place. I'm not talking seals with flippers, but seals for sorry, I'd stop joking. My broader observation is that these other afforestation and plant options will be able to be funded further down the track. It's just right now we've got a high level of uncertainty on the national reg side, which is coming into certainty in the next few months. We've also got some technical work to do on this to bring it to you. And so I'm anticipating in the earlier part of next year, or at least fundamental to the year 3 work program planning, we'll be looking at other kind of options and criteria for afforestation.
Kia ora. Any further questions? Or kia ora, Penny Smart.
Kia ora. Thanks guys for that extra PowerPoint. That was great to see. Thank you. Just wondering, just a couple of quick questions. The level of sign off for the extra 20 metres or so, and with that too, if you could just, is it 20 metre average or maximum 20 metres?
It's a 20 metre maximum average.
Yeah. And so I'm sort of thinking that there will be a higher level of sign off for these extra 20 metres.
You mean in due diligence of signing off the quality of the work, you mean, Penny?
No, just the applications.
If they come under the cap or do require the same level of sign-off and delegation. If it gets over a certain cap, which is currently sitting at 40 meters, 40k per application that goes to the Potataki. So if it comes under that threshold, it should be fine. But 20 meters, if it's a longer strip, yeah, it'll probably meet those thresholds.
Okay. And just another quick one, not actually one of the highlighted points, but I noticed in the criteria or the table that you had, you talked about poplars not being resolved yet. When was that going to be resolved, the use of poplars? And do you know, Duncan, you may or may not know, the poplars that NRC supply, are they available to KMR farmers?
Yeah, I'll start with that one because it's top of my head. Yes, they are available at the moment. The NRC has for everyone's knowledge, has a large 20-hectare soil con nursery at present, and they provide poplars and willows to help very active erosion for landowners in the Kaipara. And the first question, Penny, sorry.
Oh, I know we're not targeting high country or hill country until a year or two, so I'm assuming, I'm guessing that's when that poplar issue will be resolved.
It'll be part of the soil con strategy John previously mentioned, so that's all in the mix silver pastoral systems.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Kia ora. Any further questions from any of the members? Anybody? I just have a couple of observations. Duncan, I might have missed it, but that real pika model, which was the top end of the flow? The top of the screen or the bottom?
Apologies, the bottom of the screen was the uphill.
Okay. I thought it'd be something like that with Ngāti Hine. They tend to go from the bottom up. However, we'll just want to make another little comment, and this is not about the funding grants or the likes, but just be interested to know from yourself, given you've gone through this field advisor training, how difficult would it be to actually include in there provisions for stock water in a sort of profile like you've just presented for that Rua Pika Gully?
Excuse me, Tammy, did you mention stock water?
Yeah, water for stock.
Yeah. So stock water's in there, and because it was a dairy farm and most of the paddocks all had appropriate stock water, we didn't indicate it on that map. But in a normal situation, say that was a beef block, there would have been requirements, and we would have had some highlighted areas of where to place the reticulation with respect to what we fund, which is the provision of troughs. So we would have highlighted that on that map normally, and then indicated it in the work program for that year for the landowner.
I think much like Malcolm's question around carbon sequestration is trying to get that amount of detail included at the start of the landowner's efforts. There'd be nothing worse to get into 2 years of all of that effort. Along comes a drought. What's the first thing they're going to do? Drop the fences exactly where they've just been erected, so animals can have access to water.
Thank you, Tammy. I think that's the first question we asked that landowner when we're stock excluding. It's the biggest barrier. So we say, have you got water in this paddock? Let's talk about that first. I think that's definitely was a point raised in the training.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. There are no further questions from any of the members. Kia ora, Justine.
Kia ora, everyone. I just wanted to also let you know that we're in a mindset of continuous improvement, and we've taken really good feedback from those who went through the landowner hui about what they felt they would need as we're learning and developing these accreditation, these landowner field advisor training courses. And we've actually got some really good feedback from them, from participants, with our own staff also contributing about things like this around, what information, what checklists, what are the things that, how do you structure the conversations that we'll be taking forward and working on? Because as with anything, when you do it for the first time or starting out, there are improvements that we've heard about, we've observed ourselves that will capture good learnings like this yourself. So we are working on that as in a small sub-team in the Mōrikura to take forward. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Kia ora, Penny, Smart.
Sorry, I did have one more question. Just on the nursery and plants. So we fund the total cost of the plants, do we?
We fund, yeah, it's 50-50. Well, in real world prices, the price of the plant is the same price as the planting, so it's kind of 50-50. So we will provide half the price of the plants at order, and then half the price of the plants when they're in the ground as well. So it's quite split into 4 quarters, 2 quarters paid by KMR, 2 quarters paid by the landowner. That gives you that 50-50 mix.
So the landowner pays the total cost of the planting.
He or she will pay half the price of the planting and half the price of the plant, so it retains that ownership and responsibility for the plants. That if we paid entirely for the plants and delivered them on site, then they become KMR's plants. They are the landowner's plants as well as ours.
Oh, and I just see in there that we pay the 50% deposit and then we reimburse the owner.
So just to be clear, we're covering half the total cost of the planting. Typically, if you're doing the planting yourself, out of the total cost, half's going to be the cost of plants and half's going to be the cost of labour. It depends on the project, is the answer to your question, Penny. If we're in a situation where the landowner is doing their own planting, we'd put the 50% on the deposit. That cover the other half of the plants, cost of the plants on delivery, and that ensures that ownership thing. We then do a wrap up effectively, and if the landowners also provided all of their own labour, at that point we would reimburse them that additional 50% of the plant cost. Now this might sound all a bit convoluted, but I can assure you it's not. The key thing is to create those ownership points for the plants to ensure that they're nurtured, cared for, and got in the ground. And this gives us the kind of flexibility also to work out with the landowner what's going to work best for them. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. It's just not quite how it reads to me, but maybe it's just me.
Just ensuring there's a differentiation between the much larger projects where you're almost certainly going to have a planting crew come in, and the more the owner-led projects, which we expect to be considerably more modest. So that differentiation's there. But look, I think the text was clear to us, but we can have a look at that and at least make sure that the guidance is clear.
There are no further questions. Can someone move the receipt of Kia ora, Malcolm Welsh? Have a seconder. Penny Smart, and that is the agenda item 5.2, funding criteria adjustment for sediment reduction plan. That the report by Lizette Rawson, Duncan Cavell, John Hutton be received. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Aye. Those against? Any abstentions? That's carried. We have a mover and seconder for the changes to funding principles and criteria annotated in the attachment circulated. Kia ora. That's Councillor Greg Cooper and seconded by Councillor Jocelyn Yeoman. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Any abstentions? That's carried. And
So that's Greg Sayers, not Greg Cooper.
oh, sorry. Gee.
That's all right, mate.
Greg Sayers. Okay. Moving to morning tea. Bang on 10:55, ladies and gentlemen. Give yourselves a big pat on the back. And a big thank you, and sorry, apologies if you would have spotted me eating fruitcake and having a cup of coffee 10 minutes ago, but see you all back here at about 10 past. Tēnā koe.
Yeah, if I can just note as well, the live stream will be paused or stopped while we're having the break.
Okay.
Once we're ready to start up, if you can give us the all clear so you can have a chit chat if you need to.
Okay.
So that's not live streamed. And then Papa Nui will start it up again for part 2.
Thank you. Thank you,
Kia ora, Sandra.
I will rely on you to look after all those in the office there, Sandra.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Chair.
See you all
Kia ora,
at
Tammy.
10 past.